I now have the honor to welcome our first speaker, Christian Scheidemann. As many of you know, he's the founder and the principal conservator of Contemporary Conservation based here in New York, and he's also the brain father of this symposium. He's been my boss and mentor for over a decade now, so I may be a bit biased, but I can objectively say that his widely published thoughts and visions about contemporary art conservation have broadened the conceptual horizons of our profession. Christian is often introduced as the art doctor, a title that clearly refers to the care, precision, and knowledge that one expects of a medical doctor. What the title does not reveal at first glance is another aspect that distinguishes a good from a bad doctor. An aspect that everyone who has ever worked with Christian will not have failed to understand. That is the aspect of his immense love and appreciation of art. To me, this love is the driving force behind the visionary mind that is relentlessly questioning, doubting, and rethinking the mandates of our profession. The dynamic of the conservator within the field of contemporary art is what he wishes to consider now. Please clear your mind and be ready to think outside the box. A warm welcome to Christian Scheidemann.
Thank you, Johanna. That was very sweet. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I could just say this is the new role of the Conservator. That's how they look after 12 years working in New York. The idea for this symposium was born over a longer period of time and in conversation with our team and other colleagues and friends. I wanted to thank Provost Jeff Nesin from SVA for taking on our plan for this symposium and to trust that these issues are relevant to a large group of professionals who work within the art world and the art market. I want to thank Stephen Madoff, Chair of Curatorial Practice, and David Ross, Chair of Art Practice at the School of Visual Arts, for supporting our idea, and together with Emily Ross, Assistant Provost, to make this event happen. I would also like to mention our friend David Levi-Strauss, Chair of Art Criticism and Writing, for introducing the idea to SVA. Louise Cohn, Conservator colleague at the Statens Museum for Kunst in Copenhagen, who has worked with us for a year, was a great inspiration for us in the discussion around the context of conservation within the contemporary art world. Thank you, Louise. And by now you will all have corresponded and hopefully met Natalie Zane, our art historical researcher, who together with our studio manager Ilana Hester and Sarah Heslip have coordinated this event and to make sure that everybody got a seat. Delia Müller-Wüsten, one of our conservators, was responsible for all the graphics and printed matter for this event, and Yui Hasegawa, our technician, runner and chef, wonderful chef, and by profession an artist himself, helped with the logistics. Thank you both very much. We have a very exciting program in front of us. Thank you to all speakers who instantly have agreed to present their views on the artwork in the context of the artist's intention, but also in the reality of the art market and the expectation from the owner. Finally, I would like to give a big thanks to our conservators, Johanna Hoffmann, Christine Fulner, Juliana Moretto, Mareike Opeña, Delia Müller-Wüsten, and Sarah Cardignanos, for their inexhaustible problem-solving skills and for their absolute joy in the spirit of contemporary art. You will get to know them throughout the day. This was not meant to be a conservators' conference, although it attracted, strangely enough, a lot of conservators. I'm extremely happy that the audience represents a great number of art historians and curators, registrars from galleries, private collections, and museums. There is a good number of insurers, appraisers, and art adjusters, some gallerists, and specialists from auction houses, artist assistants and artist estates, fabricators, art advisors, shippers, and 2 art handlers. And also, I'm very happy to have a few real artists amongst us. David Reed, Elka Krajewska, Ryan Sullivan, Keith Admire, and of course Matthew Barney, if only on Skype and later. He's still asleep. He's in Washington, D.C. The title for the first crack sounded quite harsh to us, but we soon found that it would be appropriate to cover a lot of issues related to conservation and value. What is the difference in contemporary art between no crack and the first crack? In other words, what is the difference between a perfect condition and a compromised work of art? What is the nature of this crack, aging or impact damage? How does the first crack alter the market value of an artwork, and how far should we go with our treatment to bring this work back to an almost perfect condition? The fundamental question in today's talks and discussions will be how much aging and how much cracks are acceptable in contemporary art, and for whom? For the artist, for the collector? Who is making these decisions? What are these decisions based on? Our studio specializes in the conservation of contemporary paintings, sculptures, and installations. Therefore, the selections of today's topics is focused on especially these fields, although many of the issues addressed can easily be transferred to other fields such as paper, photography, performance, variable media, and other disciplines. First, I wanted to orient you with a sketch to the field our studio is working in. So, first we have the artist studio, sculpture, painting, and then there is a line, rather thick line. We forgot to put the door in, but this is basically the end of this is the door of the artist studio, and traditionally you would say the artwork, we as conservators, we are always looking for what is the original artwork, what is the original in the artwork, how does the artist wanted it to be in the first place. So we wrote down here completion, which is a very old-fashioned way to look at completion. We started through all this experience that we made. We said artworks have an infancy or a puberty, so they have to prove themselves in the artwork, in the world, and in the art world. So just to make a strict line is probably not the best thing, and also it would open the idea of the original. The meaning of the original is not exactly how the work left the artist studio. He might have forgotten something, or she might have consulted with a conservator or with a fabricator to change it, and so there is always some leeway in the making of the work. Then, so the next part is the shipment, and the shipment usually is like the first big hurdle for an artwork. First of all, how do you handle it? How do you ship it? Like, you know, all these things that nobody has ever touched a work that is just been invented, just being created. So that might need some help. Then we put a camera in. The camera is quite interesting because the first photograph is usually the photograph for the catalog in the gallery, is the photograph that everybody refers to. And this is something that collectors would say, but I want this condition. I don't want, even if the artist says, oh, it's okay to have the paint drip after the photograph, it's okay, it's still my work, but the collector would say, no, 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 I want the work in this condition because otherwise I can't sell it. And then we have the gallery. There are instructions how to set it up, how to hang it. We just heard from Onkawara show, Jeffrey Weiss is here. Onkawara did not want any hardware in his paintings, which is totally understandable, so a snap system had to be invented, which I thought was very sophisticated. Then it goes, hopefully, the artwork is being transferred, sold, shipped to the collector. This may happen several times until it then ends up in the museum, maybe. And then we are out of business. So this is our work here. And then here the museum conservator may have other concerns. Also, the museum conservator has his collection always available. We only have our work punctually available. We can, we only see it when people bring it to us, when they bring it to our attention. The other difference may be that here is a lot of transfer and value, and here I would assume is more transfer of historical value, but not of monetary value. So the collector is a very important person, and he is usually investing in their work, in artworks, and it's different from, it's exactly the same as what Jeff just said about Rauschenberg. They're not buying a car, but they are buying something that will increase in value, and this brings us to the map. For the conservator of contemporary art, an artwork is never just a solitary physical object, with all its reference to the materials and applications, to the artist and his or her intention, the conceptual contexts, its place in time and history, and with the relationship to its owner. At the moment of examination and decision-making, the artwork becomes a thing. According to Bill Brown, professor of American culture and English literature in Chicago and the author of Things, an object becomes a thing, quote, when it can no longer function according to the use to which it is commonly put. When an object breaks down or is misused, it sheds its socially encoded value and becomes present to us in new ways through the suspension of habit. He continues, we begin to confront the thingness of objects when they stop working for us. When the drill breaks down, when the car stalls, when the window gets filthy, when their flow within the circuit of production and distribution, consumption and exhibition has been arrested, however momentarily, end quote. So the artworks we are dealing with as conservator might actually be things and not objects. This may make the process of looking at artworks more interesting. It includes the material, the artist, the owner, and us. Contemporary art is always an experiment. And that's, I think, why artists make something, because they can't find it anywhere else. But what if a work is not made well or fails after only a short time? Is the artist responsible? Is there a guarantee on contemporary works of art? In my view, the artist is always right in the making of an artwork, even when they are wrong. We have invited a lawyer who can elaborate on this. So here you see Ryan Sullivan, I hope he's here, in his studio, and he makes everything wrong, but it looks very beautiful. So he uses water and oil, he lets the paint dry, underneath so that it cracks nicely. He tilts it so that the paint can shift over, and then he sprays over it. And it's a big mess, but it's very successful and very beautiful. Has anyone heard of Art Preservation Index? Art Preservation Index quotes itself as, despite the fact that many works of art cost more than an average home, no standard stability rating currently exists in the art world. So behind Art Preservation Index, there is I think it's a conservator and an investment broker, and they started this program. They rate artworks for investors from AAA to CCC. And like before you buy an artwork, you have to make sure that it's really stable, which I think are the most boring artworks. Most of the works come to the studio for treatment when they are in the process of changing the owner. This is a very important moment in the artwork's life. It has to show itself from the best condition in order to get the highest price. So here you see a work by Rudolf Stingel. It's an edition, and this one was, I think, offered and sold through an auction house, and it was bought, and then the owner said, "Oh no, I don't want this work. This is a damage." And so we were contacted, and then we said, well, this is not a damage. I mean, it is a damage, but it's an inherent damage. So it's inherent vice. So there's no insurance behind it because it's in the nature of the work, and so that's should be acceptable. It would have been nice to have it preserved before, but this is that's part of the work, and we may later during the day speak about reconstruction, reproduction. That's a very interesting. When we started to think about the concept for the symposium almost a year ago, a big topic came up, and that was perfection. Not perfection in the sense of completion, but perfection as a concept. The intention of creating a surface for deception and desire. Think of Jeff Koons. What if this perfection is interrupted just by one tiny crack or scratch? It will reveal its vulnerability and destroy the illusion. This is a complicated one and deserves another symposium. Do artworks have a function, and how can we maintain this function while staying close to our ethical codes of preserving the original? How do we find out what is the original, and again, for whom? For the artist, for the collector, for history? Reinhard Beek will speak about art with function when art works. Here you see just a detail of a work by Christopher Wool, and as we all know, his works have, his prices went through the roof, and it's very interesting that like after high auction results, we get more and more of the same artist's work, and people are actually scared about cracks, and we always tend to say this is totally okay because it comes from, so Christopher Wool, he sprays his paintings and then he takes acetone and wipes it off, and the acetone creates this. So it's basically it's not a damage, but it's a result from the process of making. There are ways to flatten this, but it's actually not a bad thing to have it in a, so this is not a, this is just to smooth out the collector or the buyer or the seller, something to get a better result. And the other thing I find interesting, since artists are making so many similar works of art, there's this competition of between the artworks. And like Johanna just recently told me that like outside of Andy Warhol's idea of making silkscreen and works of art for everybody available, there is this competition of silkscreens that line up perfectly, gain a higher value than silkscreens that are a little bit off. Has nothing to do with the artist and with the intention of the artist, but it's just something in between collectors and auction houses. So this is actually an accident and an impact, and we often are in this situation. Well, here you see handling marks that always appear maybe a year after the art handler or the collector has touched the work. So it doesn't come immediately. You cannot say, oh, this was you, this was someone else. And also this one appears maybe a year or two later, like when the climate changes and so. And then, of course, this is a big problem. And there are ways to restore it. This is the final result. But we often see, and maybe Dana, our colleague, who can elaborate on this, our clients say, can you please in-paint it, but invisibly? And that's impossible. It's almost like, wash me, but don't make me wet. So, there is no way to hide this. So we have to be honest, and we are honest. Like it looks like this, and that's acceptable, but it will never go away. Like a crack will never go away. I found this interesting art. I mean, I found, like, he's a very famous artist, Walid Beshti. These works are called copper surrogates, and you can see here these finger marks, and these are part of the artwork. Walid Beshti is an conceptual artist who embraces the entire work industry. Like everybody who works on the sculpture makes their marks, and the installers, the gallery people, everybody who touches the work leaves their marks, and he includes it, which is a very nice way to do this. And then there was Donald Judd, who was not that generous. So for the Conservator, of course, it would be like a damage to remove these fingerprints in Walid Beshti sculpture, but it would be beneficial for the artwork for Donald Judd to remove it, which is very difficult. And Nora Natch, who is also here, has a lot of experience with this. Wade Guyton is an artist we really love and we have worked a lot with. And here you can see him in almost praying in the studio in front of his printer. Now the printer is getting bigger. But what I wanted to show is, first of all, these very fine lines and almost not pixels, but these little ink droplets that are on this primed canvas. And then how sloppy he works with it in the studio. So everything, like all the scratches and abrasion that happen in the studio are fine for him. And then, but once it leaves the studio, it's not fine. And here you can see someone like an art handler or maybe the collector left his finger marks on this, what is like in a microscopic way, it's like micro balloons of ink, and we call it micro crashing. So it's not something that you can remove, but it's crashed, and there's no way to make this reversible. So in other words, and we will hear René Vara, our art appraiser and specialist, in the afternoon, and she will speak about when is an artwork devaluated and when is an artwork a total loss. And maybe she will even speak about it, what happens after the work has been declared a total loss. Kelly Walker, I want to show you. This is 3 different chocolate. It's dark chocolate, milk chocolate, and white chocolate on inkjet print on canvas, on board. So you see that, so representing the 3 races, human races, and I want to put your attention on this one here, which is mice have gnawed on the white chocolate, only on the white chocolate they have stopped, and because the bitterness of the cacao they don't like, white chocolate is basically sugar and coconut oil, and the artist says it's fine. And I wanted to show this photo because often the artist says, oh, it's okay if a mouse did it, but if a bad collector or someone who didn't pay or so, it becomes a big insurance case, no? So I think everything is very relative, and again, in this case, it's a thing. Like we are all part of a thing, and it's not objective, but it's very subjective. This is another work. This is basically constant work, and as Jeff pointed out, we will probably always be in business because the recipe for these Kelly Walker works had to be improved after a while because it always starts to bubble. A big part of our work is to respond to artists who have a question, and in this case it was an artist who put out these very nice Himalayan salt columns in Long Island, and she asked us how long will it last. And I mean, I'm so happy to be here in New York to always have someone make me think about like how long will it last? How do you know it will last that long? But I think there's a strong belief in artists that conservators know more than they do. But there is also like an artist like Keith Edmeyer who asked me recently, how can I get the termites in my wooden sculpture? So it's not only always like how long can it last, but how can I destroy it so that it looks old? And then Urs Fischer. Sometimes we are very proud not to make anything. Our profession as a conservator is not to make anything, not to fabricate anything, but we can consult and we can refine. And I think some artists like the profession or the industry of conservation because they want to arrest something in a specific time, and I think we are the perfect partners for them. And the other thing is we are very grateful to participate in this thinking process and happy to be very close with artists. This refers to the talk of Ingrid Schaffner in the later this morning, Jason Rhodes. This is the Black Pussy soiree cabaret event, which basically was like 10 parties, like a row of 10 parties, and you can see all these items like camel saddle, stools. You can see these Black Pussy words. You can see cloths. You can see beaver felt heads, and then later he declared this a sculpture, and that nobody can ever touch. Nobody has access to, and that's a big challenge for us. So first the participation and then the freezing into a historical state. So this is a big challenge to preserve all these materials and basically to make sure that this celebratory effect of this work remains and that everything reflects and the lights are fine and the music and the sounds are up so that the spirit, but Ingrid Schaffner will explore more about this. Just towards the end, I want to speak about how can conservation affect value and how can value affect conservation. I think this was one topic that we are all interested in. This is a work by Dieter Roth, rubber bands. These are old rubber bands. And then this is some supply of rubber bands. And this is now like 30 years old. And in reference to our panel in the afternoon with Martha Buskirk and 3 estate holders or representatives, we went to the Dieter Roth estate, and they would say, oh, just remove the rubber bands and you have no idea, they should be replaced. And this is how it was done then. This is the wife of Dieter Roth and the little son, Karl. And then we said, no, we don't want to do this, because this was probably worth like 800 euros, 800 D-Mark then in 81. And now it would be like 250,000. And I said, nobody wants to buy some piece of plywood with nails for 250,000 and make their own little sail ships and houses, but they want to have a like a witness of the history. So I think this work has transformed from being like a reasonable priced work to a high-end artwork, and that changes very much the perception and our approach to treating these works. And here you can see like the interactive. So this is not done by Dieter Roth, definitely, but he invited people to do it. And this is Sigmar Polke, which is a very different thing. This is just more the attitude, the gesture of doing something like a house and a tree and so. But this one refers really to the image. My last slide is about this work, and as you know, we are always dealing with the material and with the concept of the artist. This is the last edition, the last multiple by by Joseph Beuys. It's a very famous one. The German state, the biggest state, North Rhine-Westphalia, represented itself at the World Fair in 2000 with exactly this small thing. And they said, North Rhine-Westphalia, the minister president said, this is us. This is basically nature, the combination of nature and technology and the resources, and it's a wonderful edition. And here it says, after 1,000 hours, the battery needs to be exchanged, which is basically after 6 weeks, the lemon has to be exchanged, because like lemon and the acid from lemon creates energy, and so it goes forth and back. So where are we now in contemporary art? Contemporary art is already 50 years old, and there is no end to it, and that's that's a big challenge. But I think we have to maintain the ideas of contemporary art, and what I found out recently is that this lemon is actually a silicone mold of a lemon, and you can see the line here that shows that it's actually cast. So it has nothing to do with nature. It's just a visual effect, and I think this is a perfect example for the failure of curators and conservators to maintain the ideas of contemporary art. And this is my end.
Hi, Martha Buskirk. That was a very definite line in your first graphic about when the work left the studio, and I actually that was my question: isn't a lot of contemporary art not quite so clear in terms of leaving the studio and entering its next stage?
Well, that's why I suggested this infancy or this puberty, which is like some kind of time that the artwork has to prove itself within life. And so it's not this. I mean, this, I said, this is a very traditional way of looking at the original condition. So what I said is it actually expands in contemporary art.